This is the limited edition podcast on your favorite channel if you are, as we are, into the exciting artisans from the world of independent watchmaking. Today, we introduce Havid Nagan, the independent watchmaker started by Aren Bazerkanian. Fueled by Aren's passion for classical watchmaking, the brand mixes old school watchmaking techniques with modern technologies. Leveraging on some of the best artisans and suppliers allows Havid Nagan to showcase a great array of details in the materials used, the fine decoration and the intriguing mechanical solutions unlocked, keeping the offer in an attainable segment of the market. As the brand launches the new collection, the classic one really caught our eye and our interest. We take the opportunity to sit and discuss with Aren and revisit his journey so far and to unveil some of his imminent plans and projects. Enjoy the show! Here we are, Pietro from the limited edition for another episode on our podcast. As I was explaining in the intro to this one, today we're going to unleash and unveil one of the watchmakers that has not been heard a lot about and that I've been observing for the last few years. And then as time runs faster than sometimes the ideas that we may have, we had already talked a while ago with this particular watchmaker and we're coming now to collaborating. So I'm immensely proud to be able to introduce to you Aren Bazerkanian, and he will tell me if I am actually pronouncing the name correctly, from Havid Nagan, of course. Aren, how are
Yes,
you?
I'm very well. Thank you, Pietro. No, you said it perfectly. Many people butchered the last name, especially here in America, but the Europeans are a little better at pronouncing it, so it's appreciated.
Good. I'll take it as a compliment. I have the same problem with my own family name, so I know exactly the the feeling. How are you? It must be really early, of course, today in the States for you, an early rise to talk
Uh,
to us and to talk with some of our collectors.
no, not at all. When we have my wife and I, we have a 19-month-old, so this is well into the day at this point. So it's we had a and the daylight savings just had the adjustment, so it's been a very early morning today, so it's okay.
Okay, fantastic. So I appreciate your time and appreciate those collectors that are already tuned with us. As a reminder, all our episodes obviously are live, uh, and we appreciate that people may not have the time, to in the four corners of the world to be live with us, but then it goes recorded on our channel, and this is where you also can interact with us. But feel free now to send any question you may have for Aren. So Aren, I want to do a little bit differently to what I do normally. We will talk about your history, the origin of your passion for watchmaking, etc., etc. But I want to start with what we're celebrating today, which is the launch of the Classic One, which I have confidentially shown to some of our collectors. That has been received really, really well, and it marks a great step for you on solidifying a business model that you've built a few years back. You've gone through a lot of different experiences, for what I understand. Where are you now? How happy are you of this Classic One timepiece that you've just released?
It's now this is the third watch that I've worked on and debuted, and uh, it's different now in that I fully realize now that the most exciting part, the most fulfilling part, I suppose you can say, is the creation process. So developing it, seeing it from when I initially drew it on paper, uh, on a piece of paper, and sending it to the team in Switzerland and saying this is the brief, and then seeing it slowly come to life. The dial. You get pictures of the dials being prototyped, the case, the hands. Seeing that is by far the most exciting part. So when I had first gone through the process of the the first watch, that dynamic was there too, but I was so anxious to see the final result. And not to say that it's not entirely there now, but I'm realizing more and more as I'm maturing in this, is that it's really seeing it come to life, as opposed to it being introduced to the market. I'm not saying I don't care what the market thinks. At the end of the day, the reality is that I'm building these things for myself. That's the whole point of going and starting your own brand, is to put your own ideas into the world. Um, but I would say it's more, I find more excitement and fulfillment from the creation process. That's definitely the biggest difference in terms of developing the watches themselves.
Absolutely. And when I saw the watch, like we are lucky enough and we're proud to be able to represent a number of watchmakers, and all of them are on our platform because they have very clear characteristics of uniqueness. So we normally like to see in every single brand a unique design code, or mechanical engineering code, watchmaking style that shouldn't potentially possibly mix with any other watchmaker out there. In your case, we consider for example, the dials as a gem within a watch. So we all love watches because of their mechanical intricacy, the aesthetics of the movement, and we sometimes consider the dial as a part where there's not much that has not been done before. So it's quite difficult to be truly original. When I saw your dial, I had that clear feeling, those butterflies, if you like, that made me think, wow, this is something that I haven't actually seen before. So I want to ask you specifically in regards of the dial that we see very well in this very, very clear image. What was your thinking, how you conceived this multi-dimensional, deep layout of the dial, and what you wanted to achieve?
So now, you go through the process of developing it, and you think you know or can point to the inspirations that really led to the watch. And then when you finally get them delivered, and then when you finally put the watch on your wrist, it's an entirely different thing. I will say the first time I had the idea of the watch, or the dial specifically, was in Dubai. I have a retail partner over there, Perpetual. They are run by Hamdan. He's a very good friend of mine. He had hosted me in his office, and he has an immense collection of both modern independent references, and then a crazy collection of vintage Patek references. And I had seen, I forget the specific reference, but it was part of the 96 line, or a derivative from that line. And I saw that, I said, man, like there's something about these watches. They're very simple, but there's like emotion in the watch. And he had it on this beautiful strap, and it was a tiny, I think it was a 33 millimeter case. So on my wrist, it looked pretty small. It looked kind of toyish, but I loved the dial. I loved the simplicity of it. But that's Patek. So I think really looking back now, that's really where the stem grew, or the seed was planted, I guess you can say. In that time, or during that time, my wife and I were already planning on having our child. And, when she finally arrived, in that first 3-4 months, I went into this very nostalgic moment. I kept thinking about my youth. I kept thinking about, when I was a child and my mother used to take me to different places. And there was a day that we found ourselves in a shopping mall, and it was a older shopping mall. I think it was built in the 70s or 80s. So, and it hadn't been renovated. So it was very much the old style American, mahogany wood, cabinetry and all that. I kept thinking, I'm in this place. I'm like, I just keep thinking about the past and the past and the past. And I was playing around with the idea of the classic one. What is it going to look like? How the dimensions and all that. So it felt like the universe was kind of guiding me towards this final iteration of the watch that you see now. And I kept thinking, okay, if I'm going to create a quote unquote dress watch, and initially it was a pure dress watch, it was not supposed to be what you see now. Then I'm going to keep it classical dimensions. And to me, I couldn't do a 33 or 34 millimeter dimension. It just doesn't fit on me, and it doesn't look good on me. So I said, okay, it has to be a 38 millimeter watch, which it ended up being. It has to be thin, 9 millimeters, which is what it is. And I wanted the lugs to be very artisanal. The dial is the first thing I think about. That's kind of something I picked up from when I was working at FP Journe, and that's Francois Paul's vision of how he starts to design his watches. And I'm not comparing myself to Francois Paul at all, but it's a good place to reference and then gain inspiration from.
Of course.
So I said, okay, I like the that old Calatrava, the old references and the way they expressed, classical watchmaking. I kept thinking about my past and what reminded me of my past. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to make a dress watch. I'm going to make a vintage inspired sort of, steel watch. I didn't want it to be precious metal. I want it to be very much a everyday kind of wear watch for people. And for myself, of course. So what you see on the dial, on the minutes track, that is very Calatrava. That is very Patek. Even to this day, they still use these minutes tracks for some of their minute repeaters and grand complications.
Yeah.
So I took that and I said, okay, I have to make it mine, of course. That's, what's the point of copying something? And that's where you see the multi-layered dimension come out, because I love the dynamic aspect of watchmaking. And another lesson I had learned from the HN00 was, to me, now that I look at it, I'm like, man, I could have done this, I could have done that, I could have changed this, I could have added this, taken away this. And what I kept coming back to when I was in the design process for, all of the different complications and watches that I want to build, was these multi-layered dimensions. And I was like, what if we make the center dial not off-centered, but reduced, put the hours and the hours indices on it, and outside of that, create a sapphire disc and put the minutes track on it. And this is what it ended up becoming. And I was very happy to see, you're anxious because you have the drawing, which is a 2D drawing. And then you see the final 3D of it, and you're like, oh my God, now I'm really excited to see this thing, come to life and put on my wrist. So I would say the Calatrava was the biggest reference in terms of the dial layout and the construction. The small seconds, of course, at 6 o'clock. It's very classical in its origin, hence the name.
Yeah, but the result is quite surprising, because as a disclaimer, I read the article that Monochrome did on the piece, which I really enjoyed, as I normally when I read Monochrome, I always do, and I think they really caught the essence is the fact that, yeah, there may be a classical inspiration, but the final result with the use of the overimposed dial and with the use of sapphire, of course, to kind of complete the dial, but leaving a see-through onto this Clou de Paris plate, if we can call it like that, that is underneath, creates overall a very contemporary effect. I don't know if you agree with that, if that was the intention, but
it certainly is. So the reference and the inspiration is classical. What you are saying absolutely is the modern contemporary version of my own expression. So finding what you love or loved from the past, and as a note, I at this point in my enthusiasm of the industry and what I like to collect or what I like to muse over, I find myself looking more for vintage watches, to be completely honest with you. So the inspiration is vintage. The expression is contemporary, that's for sure.
Which is why then you went for a case that is made by multiple parts, and it has this architecture that is quite sinuous and quite, again, contemporary rather than vintagey.
Yes. So again, the inspiration came from not Patek, partly Patek. I am a huge fan, as you saw with the 00, it was a different shaped case and people loved it because it was something different. And, you don't see too many cushion cases being done today. It was more of a neo-vintage kind of stylism. And I said, okay, if I'm going to make a at the time a dress watch, then it has to have an interesting case. It can't just be a standard round, just put a bezel and lugs and crown
Off the
and call it a
shelf.
day.
Yeah.
Off the shelf, exactly. So what I found myself again looking for inspiration to was Urban Jurgensen. The reference 1, 2, and 3, if I'm not mistaken, and they have these sort of cascading bezels. It's like this multi-layered cake, essentially. And I saw one, I think it was the reference 1 that I had seen in Dubai, and I fell in love with it. It was the whole thing was beautifully, perfectly executed. And I thought to myself, man, nobody's doing this kind of thing. And if they are, they're in the, $100,000, $200,000 range, which is something that 0.01% of the market can obtain. I certainly can't obtain it. So I said, okay, well, in the spirit of creating something for myself, the case should also be very interesting. So on the bezel, you have 2 steps. You have the interplay of the polished finish on the inner ring, and then the outer ring is brushed. So it's very comparable to the same effect that is on the HN00, which if you look at these 2 watches next to each other, you're like, these are totally different things. But I wanted some sort of link to the watch or the watches. So that play of light is there. Next, after that was the lugs. I had seen the 2499 Patek reference, and I always loved those lugs. I always loved vintage Vacheron's play of the scallop lugs and the teardrop lugs, and I said, man, like they used to do such interesting things. It's really, it got me excited. Like this is the stuff that really got me going in terms of what I wanted to pursue, what I was interested in, what I wanted to talk about. But I said, okay, with the case, I don't think the teardrop or the scallop lugs are going to go. And for the overall watch, it wasn't going to work. So I saw these 2499 lugs and I said, man, they're very drawn out, especially at the profile where it's sort of a 3/4 profile in the front. They're such long drawn out. So I said, okay, I'm going to make mine very long and drawn out relative to the case. Normally for a case diameter of 38 millimeters, people will end at the 45, 46 millimeter lug to lug measurement. I purposefully said to the manufacturer, let's make them 47 millimeters. I had already drawn out the design that you see where it's, a slimmer silhouette from the top view, and then it's slightly scalloped coming from the side, the polished angles of the lugs. So they're very artistic in their way, and they play with the light the same way the case bezel plays with the light.
Yeah, I love how you played with the mirror polishing and the brushing as well. It really makes that interplay quite alive.
Yes. So I always, now and moving forward, what you will see from me is always a dynamic watch. Not only the dial, not only the movement. Those are, I don't want to say easy things to go after, but they are in my opinion, the low-hanging fruit of getting people's attention. What I really want to compel the collector or the enthusiast to focus on is every single detail of the watch. So the lugs, the case, the way they interplay with each other, the way they connect to each other, how they work with the dial. The crown is very vintage-esque in that it is not oversized, but it's a healthy size for a 38 millimeter watch. And I want it to be easy to use because a lot of those, vintage references used big crowns, and it was easy to manipulate the hours and minutes.
Yeah, it's a functional timepiece as well in its readability and in its functionality as well. I can see the effort in that. The slightly exaggerated as well grid on the outside of the crown.
Yes,
is something that is very user friendly. And we haven't even gone to the horological part. I mean, all of these are horological, of course, details. But when we talk about the conception of the movement and the aesthetics of the movement, which, by the way, small disclaimer, is what got me into watchmaking. I'm not an engineer. I don't understand much, or enough of mechanics, but I'm really drawn by the look of beautiful mechanics. By the way, are you wearing the classic one at the moment?
I am. Yeah. So
Okay, so yeah, we can see it on your wrist as
that's the
well.
ebony.
Yeah.
Uh, yes. So the movement, all of this was coming to me at the same time. So my brain was very, for lack of a better word, overloaded. I was having sleepless nights, good sleepless nights, of course. It wasn't like a stressful thing. It was more of a, I mean, all of these ideas are coming to me all at once. I have so many things that I want to include on the watch. And serendipitously, I had read a SJX article who does these very in-depth technical articles. He will go into the history of a lot of the brands that I had mentioned, like Urban Jurgensen and Derek Pratt, and those two names kept coming up. And on the same trip in Dubai, my best friend, who had introduced me to Hamdan from Perpetual, had just taken delivery of the Derek Pratt and Luca Soprano watch, the Remontoir.
Yeah, the
And
Montoir d'Égalité, of course, the
yes,
perpetual edition with the salmon dial with the
ex-
Eastern Arabic numerals. Yeah.
exactly. And funny enough, on my trip to Switzerland, my dial maker, Cadrano, who is headed by Romeo Granito, he's a fantastic human being. He's so on top of everything. He understands. I give him 10% of the picture, and he knows exactly where my head is at. I saw that dial. I'm like, wait a minute, that's a very familiar dial. I said, is that the Derek Pratt? He's like, yes, we do the Derek Pratt and Luca Soprano dial. I said, wow, like that's, the fact that my dials are being made in the same place where, a watch like that is being made, it was very like, oh my God, I'm amongst the greats. So he had taken delivery of that watch, and I saw the movement. I said, man, like that is a movement design. It's so interesting. It's so out of the ordinary. It just, again, I felt that excitement that I do, seeing the vintage references. So I saw this a few months after that. I had seen the article from SJX covering a Remontoir d'Égalité tourbillon pocket watch that Derek Pratt and Urban Jurgensen had collaborated upon. I saw this movement. I was like, man, like that is, it's one of the greatest things I've ever seen. It was a partially skeletonized bridges, ruthenium treated or NAC treated. I think it was ruthenium at the time. The tourbillon at 6 o'clock. And then the main plate was 5N or 6N gold. I said, I felt so much excitement that in my mind, already felt myself being compelled to, okay, I have to make like sort of an unofficial ode to this watch. Hence the decoration that you see now. Obviously, it is not at the price level or the finishing level of those watches, because those guys were, in my opinion, some of the greatest watchmakers who have ever lived, and they created a handful of watches in their lifetime.
I think,
But
yeah, in the George Daniels circle, those names you just mentioned were just some of the fundamental pillars of, the love of watchmaking that we all
yes,
nurture.
yes. So very, if you know kind of watchmaking, I guess you can say. And I saw that, I said, okay, the decoration has to be something reminiscent of this. Hence the decoration that you see. Now, in terms of initially what I was going to do with the movement, it was going to be a Le Jouperet 7380, which is it's actually a very, very, very good movement in that it is 2.7 millimeters thin, which is ultra thin. I think it's a 3-day power reserve or a 90-hour power reserve, which is substantial on a single barrel, which is impressive. The only problem was that I showed them the decoration of the movement that I wanted, and they said, Aaron, it can't be done because because of the thinness of the bridges, we can't skeletonize the bridges. So I said, okay, I'm not going to compromise on the overall look of the movement that I want. What else is there? And one of the lessons that I learned from the OO was that the watch was too thick. The movement inside was 5.35 millimeters thick, which if you put that movement in a dress watch, it's not a crazy thickness you're going to get to. But for the 00, because of the curve and the lug architecture, it made it thicker than it needed to be. So I said, okay, guys, I cannot go past 9 millimeters thin on this watch. It's vintage inspired, it's a time only watch. We have to make the improvements, and we have to stay consistent with what I want. Then they sent me a rendering of the AMT 6600, which is what this movement is.
Yeah.
And I said, what the hell is this? I've never heard of AMT. I didn't know it existed. I don't know I've never seen this movement. And they said, well, Sellita has a bespoke and high-end arm called AMT.
It's like a custom shop, like for Gibson custom in terms of
exactly.
mechanical movements by Sellita. Yeah.
Yes. So initially I told them, guys, no Sellita, no ETA. This is not the market that I want to go into. It's not that there's anything wrong with those movements. They're great movements. But for me, it wouldn't work. I know their thickness. I know everybody uses them. I didn't want it to be such a common thing that was inside the watch. So they sent me this, and they said, you should really consider this. I said, okay, can it be cost certified? Can it be decorated the way I need it to be? And they said, yeah, for 95% of what you wanted, we can do. So this is what resulted. If you notice at the main plate area where the ratchet pawl and the ratchet wheel is, it's gray as opposed to the 5N gold.
Yeah,
that was only because when you're galvanizing to 5N, you're adding a bit of thickness to the material, and it would affect the function of the watch. So we had to make that ruthenium treated, which in my opinion still looks very good. And the rest of it was 5N galvanized. So it
looks fantastic because you managed anyway to create that contrast that I think was in your intentions from the beginning, to create those contrasts through the skeletonization and through the different colors finishing that you have on the movement itself.
Yes. The additional decorations were it's slight anglage. It is not under a loop you can see the anglage, but to your naked eye it's not very apparent. The only reason we didn't go very deep anglage or the highly polished anglage is because the price of the watch was going to a point that I personally didn't feel comfortable. Were
you discussing with Sébastien Cholmonté on the project at AMT, or was it with the whole team of AMT?
No. So my contacts with them were limited. I am lucky to have partnered with an individual named Guillaume Tetou, who,
of course.
Funny enough, late last week, he just announced that he's on the board of directors, I think, for Hotlands, which is the company that he had started. And
exactly. He was one of the founders, wasn't he?
Yes, exactly. So this all came to be because my former manufacturer had a change in leadership, and this was when I was running the subscription for the HN01 Lucene project, and I'd rather not go into the crazy details of it, but essentially it rendered the project financially infeasible. We were doing very well. I had 65 fully paid orders on the watch at a $15,000 price point. So, to me, it was a great success. Fate would have it that it didn't come to be. So that project never made it onto the wrists of people.
Which is the one we're seeing here, yeah?
Exactly. So that's one of the references. That was the Moonlight Blue reference. So I refunded all the money, and I was in this freak out mode of, oh my God, I'm parting ways with this manufacturer. And my contact there was Mauro Egermeni, who is now the CEO of Ming
Watches. Yeah.
Ming Watches.
It was a Schwartz Etienne before, of course.
Yes. So I called him. I said, Mauro, I really need your help. I need to find a manufacturer. I need someone as good as you. And the next day, he had already contacted Guillaume and put me in touch with him. And funny enough, Guillaume had just started essentially his own, manufacturer, Schwartz Etienne, and said, Aaron, we can help you with this. It can be done. It's not a problem. And we started immediately. I had already drawn out the details of the Classic One and sent it to him and said, look, this is what I'm thinking. This is the measurements. These are my absolute wants. These are the things that potentially we can compromise on.
I was asking about Sebastian because Sebastian Chemonte was the very inspiring designer, movement designer and movement constructor à la Jouperet back in the day when the revamp of Arnold and Son was masterminded, and La Jouperet was creating all those crazy movements like the time pyramid, for example, all the ultra thin tourbillons, etc., etc. And I know he's now involved with the AMT and the consolidation of this branch, as you explain, of basically custom producer of movements, which is a branch of Sellita that now makes very, very bespoke movements for smaller independent watchmakers. And here we can go a little bit to your business model and to understand a bit more about you, Aren, and how you've decided to progress rather than going the way of creating a manufacturer, which is in America, for example, still an impossible task, like it is in England, where we only have 3 basically watchmakers that make watches in England. In America, you have Josh Shapiro and maybe that genius of Dan Spitz that is obviously with his story, but you work with a concept that is known as établissage. So you rely on professionals to make your vision come true, and so you have direct links to Switzerland to be able to create yourself.
Yes. So for those that aren't familiar, établissage was the way every manufacturer functioned in the past. You had Vacheron, Patek, AP. They would go to these different literal houses where the artisans lived and they worked. And this guy made dials, this guy made hands, this guy made the barrels and the ratchet wheels and the mainsprings. You'd come up, you go to them and say, these are the dimensions, this is the overall project, we need it to fit into this case, these are the internal mechanics of the case, and that was it. They were doing what I'm doing, or what in the higher end Simone Brett is doing. It's the historical way of doing things, and it's not better or worse.
The difference being with those big watchmakers, they then acquired most of the suppliers that were working with them at the beginning.
Yes, and it's a substantial investment. It's not something that I am remotely capable of at this point, at least. Would I want to do that? Absolutely. It's why wouldn't you want to vertically integrate your production and make things? You prioritize yourself. You can streamline the process of the R&D and prototyping and finally production. But I had even run the idea of building a manufacturer movement, as it were, for myself. And Mauro had told me, just FYI, just to build a hours, minutes, seconds basic caliber, you're looking at a minimum of $1 million, $1.5 million Swiss francs. So that's how expensive it is to come up with.
And a lapse of time of 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the specs. Yeah.
So it's good for people to hear these things and know these things, because that's what it takes to get to that level. Everybody's dream is to do that, of course, but there's the reality of the world and where you are in life and how you can build your business. So the thing is, in terms of the product itself, there's no real difference. The finishing that you're looking for, the specs that you're looking for, all the different materials and all that is very much obtainable. If I wanted to make the Classic One in platinum or white gold or tantalum, whatever, it can all be done. It's the cost that you have to consider, 1, upfront to you, and 2, to the eventual retail price to the collectors. So, to do a white gold case or a platinum case, you're looking at, in some cases, 5 times the cost of what it takes to build one of these. So, right now we're in the process of a hypothetical limited edition of the Classic One. A very prominent collector in Miami saw the watch and said, Aren, I love what you've done. I love everything about the watch, but I have 250 watches. I don't have time to wear these watches. If I'm going to buy something, I need it to be special. I said, okay, you know, I'm open to having the discussion. Can you do it in platinum? Well, you're looking at a minimum, you know, retail price of 45,000 to do it in platinum. What about white gold? And platinum, working with platinum is one of the hardest things to work with because it's very rubbery, the material.
Yeah.
So finishing it is very, very hard. So a lot of the cost is, one, the material itself, and two, even more importantly, finishing and working with the metal. So, you know, we're looking at a potential project, sort of like a limited edition of the watch. But again, you're looking at for the white gold version, a $35,000 retail price.
Whereas
And
with the steel version, one of the strong points is that you managed to keep it quite on the attainable side. You know, if you consider all the specs we've just discussed, from the mechanical setup to the case, which is made of, you know, is it 40 different parts? You know, it's an incredible amount of
the case is 29 different parts. Yeah.
29 different parts, and then the dial that we described. So the fact of being retailed at $9,000 altogether, it was one of the things that surprised me the most. So no, I totally appreciate that. And as we go backwards, Aren, as we said, we started from the star of the show, which was the classic one. Of course, congratulations on the launch. We're going back now to understand how you got where you are. What was your journey in terms of appreciating and sharing this passion for watchmaking? And when did you have the crazy idea to put yourself out and launch something that could be obviously a contribution to the independent watchmaking market?
So really the seed of it was, I was 21 years old when I started paying attention to watches. And it was a very, if I may say, you know, surface level attention. And I was paying attention to Rolex, Patek Philippe, and Audemars.
As we all did.
As we all do. Most of the time, that's where you start. I was listening to a song. I was going to the gym and pumping myself up. You know, I had a hip hop song on, and there was an artist that was talking about Frank Mueller. And I heard Frank Mueller on the wrist, and I was like, man, what the hell is Frank Mueller? I've never heard of that. You know, I know Rolex, Patek, and AP. I Googled Frank Mueller, and it was an $11,000, I think it was $11,000 or $12,000 Casablanca Havana. And I saw this watch, the case shaped, everything about it was, oh my God, this is a watch. You know, I've never seen anything that even remotely looks like this. And I was ignorant to the fact that Patek had done tonneau cases in the 30s and 20s. So, you know, to seeing this was the first time seeing something that wasn't round or looked like a Rolex. So I went down the rabbit hole from that point. I started finding out about the independents, and eventually I found out about François-Paul Journe, FP Journe. Immediately I fell in love. It was like, this is it. I found the brand that, you know, I'm going to work for the rest of my life to obtain one of his watches, and it would be something that I pass down to my children, and it would be like one of the biggest accomplishments of my life. My wife, being the wonderful woman that she is, had my birthday was coming up, and she had gifted me tickets to the first time and the only time that Watch Time held an event in Los Angeles. And I saw that François-Paul Journe, or FP Journe, the brand, was going to be there. And then I saw Grupo Forzi, De Bethune, you know, all these brands that I had just started learning about. I'm like, oh my God, this is like a match made in heaven. You know, I'm finally going to see these things that I'm learning and obsessing over. And I go, I see, you know, all the De Bethunes, and Steven Rostovsky introduced me to the brand, and he's a good friend of mine, and he's equally as passionate as I am, and very knowledgeable on the history of the brand. And he said, you should go talk to Pierre from FP Journe. I was like, I totally forgot about FP Journe. You know, you come into the warehouse and every brand is there, so you're kind of like, I don't know which way to go. So I rush over. I meet the employee that I eventually would become the replacement for in the Los Angeles boutique. and he was wearing the chronometer Van Havana. So I was looking at that watch and the movement. I'm like, man, like this is art. It's not a watch. This is art. I see Pierre. I introduce myself and say, my name is Aren. I have no experience in this industry. I have very little knowledge of what's going on here, but something is drawing me to you. I don't pay me a negligible paycheck. I don't care what it is. I need to be in this world. And he said, and he was very impressed by my passion. And he said, I don't have an opening. Here's my card. Be in touch. I said, okay. 2 months later, I sent him an email saying, hey, Pierre, I just wanted to check in. I'm still very interested. Let me know if there's an opportunity. He emailed me back within 2 minutes, 3 minutes, something like that. And Pierre, I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure. He's this commercial machine. He's unlike anything I've ever seen in terms of building a brand and really staying true to a brand's vision. And said, we have an opening in Los Angeles. And I didn't even, now I think back, I'm like, why didn't I Google and try to find how to be around FP Journe more? So I got excited. He put me in contact with Laurent Journe, who is the brother of Francois Paul. I go interview 2 times. On the second interview, they take me into the back office and say, look, we love you. We would love to have you. We need help with the admin side. And this is mid 2019 when FP Journe wasn't what it is now. And I said, look, I come from real estate. I come from operations. This is easy for me. I can do this, no problem. I just need you to teach me about the technical side, about the history of watchmaking and all that. And I looked at it as what better way to learn everything about watchmaking than from the greatest watchmaker that I could think of. So I started there. I spent 3 years there. In that time, in that same interview, I told Laurent, look, you have me. We had briefly discussed salary and all that and said, look, we're good. I'm good to go. I told him, look, I don't think I'm ever going to leave this place unless the only reason I can say is I'm going to launch my brand eventually. And he said, okay, fair enough. And he appreciated the honesty. About 2.5 years in, I had told him, Laurent, I think it's approaching the time that that I'm going to launch my brand. I have worked everything, and that was a whole process, getting the 00 to a point where it was finally prototyped and getting it, on my wrist.
Which we can see as well, your launch piece.
Yeah, that was my first baby, as it were. And he said, just let me know 2-3 months in advance so you can help me find someone, a replacement. And we started looking for someone that would eventually replace me. And Laurent was it was a very bittersweet moment because I loved FP Journe. I still love FP Journe. I was at the boutique the other day. They're like my family. And he said, why are you doing this to me? I wanted you to become my replacement. You were going to become eventually the boutique director, and if not a bigger role in the company. And I said, I would love to, like, it would be in the honor of my lifetime to do something like that. But I have this thing that is pulling me. Like, I have to go see this through. I have to try. So he appreciated that. He respected it. And, it was a very nice parting moment. And I launched Havid Nagan in April of 2022. Initially, when I launched it, obviously you're very anxious. What's going to happen? Is anybody going to care about my watches or me or, what I'm trying to do? And I was very happy if I sold 40 of them, 50 of them. We ended up in 3 months selling 115 of them. Amazing. Which was, to me, like, how is this happening to me? It didn't feel real. All of the traveling to Switzerland and going to the manufacturer and meeting all of the people that I had been emailing with and video conferencing with, it was like this aha moment. I found myself in the world, in my life. I found the reason I'm here, the thing that pulls me towards enthusiasm or a purpose. I found it. I found it.
I guess my intuitive question was, apart from asking you also the meaning of the name that you've used on your dials, but also what was the message that you felt so compelled to want to convey? And is that message, has that message progressed and changed along the way, or can you elaborate on that?
So I'll start with the name. In the time of learning the history of horology, and every FP Journe boutique has a bibliothèque or a library that he has all of the historical books, and a lot of them are in French, so you're translating a lot of things as you're reading through them. One of the dynamics of Francois Paul and where he got it from was Breguet, who is a massive inspiration aesthetically to me. Is if you are not the watchmaker or the creator of the watch, physically creating the watch, then your name does not belong on the dial. And I took that to heart. I wanted to respect that tradition. And I said, okay, if my name's not going to go on it, how do I connect it to me somehow? There has to be some sort of connection to me. And, I thought, okay, I'm Armenian, and I didn't want the brand to be overly Armenian in a way, because I didn't want to alienate or put myself in a box. But I thought, okay, I want the watch, like ideally the brand to go on, long after I'm gone, and, eventually maybe my children take over. And, I was thinking 30, 40, 50 years in advance. I said, okay, legacy, eternity, forever. And I said, oh, well, there's a nice word in Armenian. It's Havid Nagan, which is loosely translated unending time. So call it eternity. So it was initially going to be Havid Nagan, Havid with the symbol on top of the E, Nagan. And then a good collector friend of mine said, Aaron, drop the E, just call it Havid Nagan. And I was like, man, it comes off the tongue well, at least for me.
Yeah.
And that's how it came to be. Now, in terms of why I wanted to build Havid Nagan was initially it was very, for lack of a better word, innocent. It was I was going through a mall called South Coast Plaza in Orange County. I'm going through all the different boutiques, the watch boutiques over there. It's sort of like the Rodeo Drive of Orange County. And I kept thinking to myself, man, one, there isn't a watch that really I feel very drawn towards in any of these brands. And two, if it's something that's remotely got that dynamic, it was 50, 60, $100,000. And I was like, I can't afford these. I can't partake in this enthusiasm. So I went home that day. I said, you know what? I'm going to draw out what would be my watch, the ideal watch. And 90% of what you see with the OO was drawn out on that paper. And then it kind of, the idea took over and over and over. And I said, you know what? Let me try to find a manufacturer. Maybe I can I don't know how much it costs to make these things. Maybe I can find someone that can build a one-off piece. I can have my watch. I can wear it for the rest of my life. I'll be happy. As I'm going through the suppliers and talking to different suppliers, they're saying, Aaron, this is a nice design. Like, this is serious. It's, the way the strap integration was working with the OO. It was very high end. The grade 5 titanium, all the ideas that I had for what the watch would be. They're like, you should pursue this. So I said, okay, I didn't think that I'd want to make it a commercial thing, but you know what? Let's find out. And then I Googled Swiss watch manufacturer, and one of the pages included Schwartz Etienne.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? Let me go contact these guys. So I did, and Mauro is the one that responded to me and said, yeah, we can make this come to life. I said, okay. And I had no idea what the cost was. And then he told me the cost, and I was like, oh, great. It's the cost of a, $35,000. I was like, where the hell am I going to come up with $35,000? At the time, my wife and I had just gotten married. We're living off on our own for the first time. We have a mortgage. We have car payments. We have all these things, the adult of life. And me and her were going back and forth saying, okay, look, I'm passionate. I'm going to see this thing through. I'm going to commit my life to it. It's either you give me the chance. We're in agreement that you give me the chance to go and pursue this and see what happens. Or, I stay at my job at FP Journe, which was a great job, by the way. The salary was great. The people was great. Everything was great. And on Christmas, she had this envelope with a check written out for the amount that it would cost to develop these 3 prototypes. And, she said, go do it. I believe in you. Let's see if you can build this thing. So that's how it really came to be. That's the
what a story.
The seed story. It's in terms of the vision. Like I said, it was innocent. I just wanted to build something for myself that is still very much to
express what the drive you had
inside
you that probably initially took you to FP Journe as well.
Yes. So it was, you see, I can tell you, 22 years or 25 years of FP Journe, they haven't changed anything. Their marketing is nothing, the budget. They haven't changed their strategy in terms of what they do commercially. So I looked at it, I was like, man, this guy is an idealist in a world of commercial endeavors and everyone trying to make a project more financially feasible. How can we squeeze more, juice out of it? Yeah. This guy was just doing things that he wanted to do with no regard to the financial side. So I took that as sort of, if I'm going to do something, then it has to be for me. Eventually, I think if I stick to the vision that I have, I wholeheartedly believe that it will draw people towards me, and not in a come buy my watches, kind of way. It's more of a look. I'm a Armenian kid born and raised in Los Angeles. I have no connection to the Swiss industry. I have no family members that are watchmakers. I'm very disconnected from this world. But I deeply care about what the future of the industry is. And I think
you bring that energy that only the independent watchmakers, independent is the big word there, because regardless of the business model, integrated manufacturing or établissage, or it's the personal drive that brings you to want to express yourself within the rules of an art, the art of watchmaking. It has been going for centuries, having fun with those rules and trying to propose something that is actually ultimately completely different, or different to some extent to what has been done before, which is
and you look at the biggest names, namely Richard Mille, for example, is one of the greatest brands now, and 2 billion in turnover at a very low production number. One, he's a visionary. 2, he's making these crazy, looking very expensive watches and all that. But the in terms of the mechanical, the technical side of his watchmaking, I mean, most of them were using base calibers from many of the brands that I know and talk to, and adding Dubois Depraz modules. So it's not like it's impossible to make this a successful thing, or a thing that continues 20, 30, 40, 50 years, if not more. What I'm seeing is the consistent connection between all of these brands is sticking to the vision. What is it that you want the product to represent? What do you want it to mean to people? And how do you really...
sorry to interrupt, but it's a time where, and we have witnessed it. We started in 2015 with the limited edition, talking about independent watchmaking, artisan watchmaking, which were very, very funky concepts at the time, if you were not heavily into watchmaking. And now it's become actually a true spirit of watchmaking. It's recognized to be in the artisans, actually. So the reality has completely flipped over to what we were accustomed to. And so there is a big platform to express yourself these days. That's
yes, I mean, look, my context is FP Journe. That's why it comes up so much. I study all of these different brands because I want to see, what makes them successful, what, wrong steps to avoid. There's things that you can pick up. When I joined FP Journe in 2019, we had a safe full of watches. 50, 60, Elegant, Regency Dial, Tourbillon, Resonance, whatever you wanted, you can come in and buy and leave that day. What changed? I know what didn't change was the way the company operates and how they do things. What changed is what you're alluding to is the market. Uh, I don't know what the future is in terms of what people are going to go towards. I'm sure it will include both the mainstream brands and the independent brands. But it seems like the independent brands are putting the ball in the court of the mainstream brands to really up their game in terms of innovation, expression, the overall product. Because if MB&F and Richard Mille and Simone Brett and all these funky out there watches that are watchmakers, aren't watchmakers, um, if they can find a way to hone in on the market and build a community of passionate people, it's to me a slap in the face of the mainstream brands, and not a direct slap, but it's more of a look, we're doing this. This is what we're catering to. If you guys want to change your business model and make it less commercially viable, but make it more important and really deliver to the end user, then a lot of things have to change. So
It's definitely about relating to the end users that are very different to 20 years ago. The level of knowledge, understanding, the culture for watchmaking has completely changed, and the artisans seem to really have caught that much more in an empathic way, and that makes the difference today in the market, where we're living a period where some of the bigger brands are really struggling now. It's another big phase of reset, which I have seen cyclically over the last 20 years, at least 3 times. And at the same time, you see the artisans actually completely thriving on the other end of the spectrum. But listen,
yeah,
Aaron, this would be another big conversation that we can have anytime, because I enjoy this chat really a lot. We normally limit to 45 minutes pretty much, so we've gone well over the time, but it was a pleasure. I have abused of your time a little bit, and I think a lot of our collectors, a lot of our friends would have enjoyed this conversation. I can only thank you for now, and
thank you.
we will pass over any possible comment or question that may come across, or see you on another interview, and hopefully see you as well in the flesh, either in Geneva or in London if you're coming, or in the States. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And I see Goldfinger commented. I don't know who the collector is, but thank you. I appreciate your words.
Yeah.
It's almost 10 a.m. here on a Monday, so I would imagine a lot of my circle and the group that I have in locally here are at work, and I'll share the video with them, and I'm sure it'll be a conversation. So
we'll do that. Thank you, Britton, as well, and thank you for those that have intervened and passed their comments here. We love independent watchmaking. We love the artisans. We love the people like Aren. They put their life and their heart in developing something that sounds very anachronistic. Like every story of an artisan watchmaking can seem impossible, can look completely anachronistic, but then the result is that they manage to move the drive and the heart and the passion of a lot of people around the world. And this is why artisan watchmaking really is a gift of our time. Aren, congratulations on your work and on your passion, and I'll see you very soon.
Thank you, Pietro. Thank you to everyone at the limited edition. I appreciate it.
Thank you. The full listing of Havid Nagan is on the limited edition, and we are looking also to list the initial collections that Aren talked about today. So you have a full view on the brand and and the collection. Excuse me. I'll see you all very soon.
Thank you, guys.